I want you to imagine walking into a wedding where everyone is smiling, laughing, surrounded by family and friends. Now imagine one man sitting alone in the back row, hands folded tightly, eyes fixed on the floor. No one beside him, no one whispering encouragement, just silence. What happened next would leave the entire room in tears and redefine what kindness really looks like. Because sometimes the most powerful moment at a wedding isn't when the bride walks down the aisle. Sometimes it's when someone unexpected stands up and says words no one ever saw coming. Before we continue, if stories of kindness and humanity touch your heart, take a moment to subscribe, like this video, and share your thoughts in the comments. This is Kindness World, a place where real stories remind us how powerful simple compassion can be. The man sitting alone was named Daniel. He was in his late 50s, dressed neatly in a dark suit that looked like it had been worn many times before. His shoes were polished but scuffed at the edges. He kept adjusting his tie not because it was crooked but because his hands needed something to do. Daniel was the father of the bride. Years ago, Daniel's life had fallen apart in quiet ways. His wife passed away after a long illness, leaving behind a house that felt too big and too empty. Friends drifted away, not out of cruelty, but because grief makes people uncomfortable. Over time, phone calls stopped. Invitations faded. Daniel learned how to live small, quiet days. His daughter, Emily, was his world. He raised her the best he could, working long hours, cooking simple dinners, helping with homework late at night. But life moved fast. Emily grew up, moved out, built a life of her own. Daniel was proud of her, but the distance grew, not from lack of love, just from time. When Emily announced her wedding, Daniel was happy, truly happy. But happiness carried a shadow. He had no one to bring, no siblings nearby, no close friends left. On the day of the wedding, he arrived early, hoping to avoid attention. He chose a seat in the back, telling himself this day wasn't about him. Around him, guests filled the room. Laughter echoed. Families hugged. Someone asked, "Where's your table?" Daniel smiled politely and said, "I'm just here to watch." No one noticed how his eyes watered. The ceremony was beautiful. Emily looked radiant. Daniel watched her walk down the aisle, his heart full and aching at the same time. When it came time for speeches, he assumed he would quietly slip out later. He hadn't planned to say anything. He didn't think anyone would notice if he left. But someone did notice. Her name was Margaret. She lived next door to Daniel for nearly 15 years. She was the kind of neighbor who waved every morning, brought soup when someone was sick, and remembered birthdays without reminders. When Daniel's wife passed away, Margaret was the one who quietly shoveled his driveway, left groceries on his porch, and sat with him in silence when words failed. Margaret had been invited to the wedding not as family, but as someone Emily remembered fondly from childhood. She saw Daniel sitting alone and felt something tighten in her chest. As the room settled and the microphone was passed around, Margaret stood up. At first, people thought she was just another guest offering congratulations. She walked slowly to the front, turned toward the crowd, then looked directly at Daniel. Her voice shook, but it was clear. "Don't look at the bride," she said softly. "Look at him." The room went silent. She pointed gently toward Daniel. "This man sat alone today, not because he has no love, but because he spent his life giving it away." Daniel's head snapped up. His eyes met hers, wide with surprise. Margaret continued, "I watched him raise a daughter after losing his wife. I watched him show up every day, even when no one was watching. He never asked for help. He never complained. And today he came here alone so his daughter could feel surrounded by joy." You could hear people sniffing back tears. Margaret turned to Emily. "Your father is the reason you know what love looks like. And no one who loves like that should ever feel alone." She walked over to Daniel, took his hand and said, "You're not sitting alone anymore." The room erupted into applause. Guests stood. Some cried openly. Daniel tried to speak, but no words came. He simply held Margaret's hand and nodded, tears streaming down his face. From that moment on, everything changed. At the reception, people pulled up chairs around Daniel. They asked about his life, his memories, his stories. He laughed more that night than he had in years. Emily hugged him tighter than ever before, whispering, "I'm so sorry, Dad. I didn't realize." Daniel realized something too. Kindness doesn't always come from grand gestures. Sometimes it comes from someone who sees you when you think you're invisible. That night, Margaret didn't give a long speech. She didn't make it about herself. She simply reminded a room full of people to look again, to notice the quiet ones, the lonely ones, the ones who show up without expecting anything in return. In the weeks after the wedding, Daniel's life slowly changed. Neighbors stopped by, invitations came again. He started attending community events, not because he suddenly became popular, but because one act of kindness opened a door he thought was permanently closed. And Margaret? She went back to her normal life. Gardening, baking, waving every morning. She never talked about that moment unless someone asked. To her, it was simple. She saw someone hurting and chose not to stay silent. That's the thing about kindness. It doesn't need permission. It doesn't need perfect timing. It just needs courage. If you're watching this and thinking of someone who sits alone, someone who never asks for help, someone who always shows up quietly, maybe today is the day you stand up for them. Because you never know how one sentence, one hand held, one moment of compassion can change a life. And sometimes the most beautiful part of a wedding or any gathering isn't the celebration itself. It's the reminder that no one is meant to stand alone. Let this story stay with you. Let it move you to notice, to speak up, to be kind even when it feels small. Because kindness, when given at the right moment, can echo for a lifetime.